There is a sound that millions of women around the world associate with something more than a visitor at the door. A sound that meant beauty was coming to you, not to a store you had to travel to, not to a counter staffed by someone who did not know your name, but to your front door, carried by a woman you probably knew, who would sit with you at your kitchen table and open a bag full of products and talk to you about them the way a friend talks rather than the way a salesperson sells. The sound of the Avon doorbell. And the story behind that sound, behind the company that invented it and the women who rang it and the lives that were transformed on both sides of every door it opened, is one of the most genuinely revolutionary stories in the history of not just the beauty industry but of women's economic independence in the modern world. The beginning is a story of failure that became the greatest accident in beauty business history. The year is 1886. A man named David McConnell is trying to sell books door to door in New York and not doing particularly well at it. Books are heavy, books are expensive, and the women who answer the doors he knocks on during the day, because the men are at work and it is the women who are home, are not overwhelmingly enthusiastic about purchasing literature from a traveling salesman. But McConnell is resourceful and he is paying attention. He has been giving away small vials of perfume as incentives to listen to his book pitch, and he has noticed something interesting. The women are far more excited about the perfume than about the books. They smell it and ask about it and want to know where they can get more of it. The perfume, which McConnell has been mixing himself from simple formulas, is the product. The books were never the product. McConnell had the intelligence and the humility to recognize what the market was telling him. He abandoned the books and founded the California Perfume Company, naming it for the glamour and sun-drenched optimism of a state he associated with freshness and possibility even though his business was based in New York. The perfume he had been giving away as a bonus became the core of a product line that he sold directly to consumers through a network of agents, women who would carry the products from door to door and sell them to their neighbors and friends and acquaintances in the same way that McConnell himself had been selling books, but with the significant advantage that the women who answered the door were genuinely interested in what was being offered. The decision to build the sales force entirely from women was not simply a practical recognition that women were home during the day while men were at work. It was a decision with a social dimension that McConnell may not have fully articulated even to himself at the time, but that would prove to be the most important and most enduring aspect of what he built. In 1886, the economic opportunities available to women in America were extraordinarily limited. A woman who needed to earn money, because she was widowed, because her husband's income was insufficient, because she was unmarried and supporting herself, because she simply wanted her own income independent of her husband's, had very few options that did not require leaving the home, working in factories or domestic service, or accepting whatever was available in the narrow range of occupations considered appropriate for women of the era. McConnell offered something genuinely different. A woman who became an Avon lady, as they would come to be called, could earn money on her own schedule, in her own neighborhood, using her own social connections, without leaving her domestic sphere but without being economically dependent within it either. She was her own boss in the most practical sense. She controlled her hours, her customers, her territory, her income. She was a businesswoman in an era when that word was not applied to women, running her own small enterprise with the support of the product and the brand, but with the autonomy and the economic independence that very few professional structures of the era made available to women. The company was renamed Avon in 1939, inspired by the Avon River in England and by the landscape around Stratford-upon-Avon that McConnell associated with a beauty and a cultural richness that seemed right for a beauty brand with ambitions beyond its original perfume range. By then, the California Perfume Company had been operating for 50 years, had survived 2 world wars and the Great Depression, and had built a network of sales representatives that numbered in the hundreds of thousands and that spanned the United States from coast to coast. The Avon lady was already a cultural institution, a recognizable figure in the social landscape of American communities of every kind, from urban neighborhoods to rural towns where the nearest retail store was a significant journey away. The significance of the Avon lady in rural communities deserves particular emphasis because it speaks to something essential about what Avon was that no other beauty company was. In the early and middle decades of the 20th century, the women who lived in rural America did not have easy access to department store beauty counters or to the variety of products that urban consumers took for granted. They lived far from the centers of retail commerce, in communities where the range of goods locally available was limited and where the arrival of a traveling salesman of any kind was an event rather than a routine occurrence. The Avon lady, who was typically a neighbor or a community member rather than an outsider, brought beauty products directly to these women's doors and brought with her something that was as valuable as the products themselves: a connection to a wider world of beauty, a moment of pleasure and attention and self-care in lives that were often hard and often isolated. The Great Depression of the 1930s, which devastated most businesses and drove most sales down, had a paradoxical effect on Avon. When the conventional economy contracted and people stopped going to stores and stopped spending on non-essentials, the Avon model became more relevant rather than less. Women who needed to earn money found in Avon an accessible income opportunity that required minimal investment and offered genuine flexibility. Consumers who were cutting back on discretionary spending found that the personal relationship with their Avon representative, the kitchen table conversation, the samples, the trusted recommendation from someone who knew them, made them more willing to spend their limited beauty budget on Avon products than on anything they would have to actively seek out from a retail store. The direct relationship between seller and buyer was, in economic hard times, more valuable than ever because it was built on trust rather than on aspirational retail environments that felt inappropriate when money was tight. The Ding Dong Avon calling advertising campaign, launched in 1954, became one of the most recognized advertising moments in American television history. The phrase, delivered by a cheerful, respectable, well-dressed woman at a front door, captured the entire Avon proposition in 2 words. It was personal, it was familiar, it was domestic, it was not threatening or aspirational or demanding. It was simply beauty, arriving at your door, carried by someone you could trust. The campaign ran for decades in various forms and embedded the Avon brand in the American cultural consciousness so deeply that even people who had never bought an Avon product recognized the reference immediately. The Avon international expansion that began in earnest through the 1950s and accelerated through the 1960s and 1970s brought the direct selling model to countries around the world with results that went far beyond commercial success. In markets where women had even fewer economic opportunities than in the United States, the Avon representative role offered something of extraordinary value: genuine income, genuine independence, genuine access to a professional network and a commercial ecosystem that most women in those markets had been entirely excluded from. In Brazil, where Avon became one of the most successful and most deeply embedded beauty companies in the country's history, the Avon representative network eventually numbered in the millions, creating an economic infrastructure of female entrepreneurship that was genuinely transformative for the women and the communities involved. The Brazilian Avon story is in many ways the most dramatic expression of what the direct selling model can do when it meets a market where economic opportunity for women is genuinely scarce and the desire to earn independently is genuinely powerful. The Avon representative in a Brazilian favela or a rural community in the interior of the country was not just selling cosmetics. She was a businesswoman, a community connector, a source of credit, through the Avon representative's ability to take payment in installments from customers, and a demonstration that women could run their own economic lives on their own terms. The scale of the Avon operation in Brazil, with its millions of representatives and its presence in every corner of the country, made it one of the most significant forces for women's economic inclusion in Latin America's largest economy. The Avon product range that developed across the brand's history was deliberately broad and deliberately accessible, built on the understanding that the beauty needs of the Avon customer were the full spectrum of beauty needs and that the Avon lady needed a product range comprehensive enough to address whatever her customers were interested in. Fragrance remained a core category from the very beginning, with Avon producing some of the most recognized and most beloved mass-market fragrances in the world. The Little Dress Collection, the Amari fragrance that became one of the brand's most commercially successful, the Today Tomorrow Always that brought romantic fragrance to an accessible price point. Skincare developed through the mid-20th century into a substantial range built around accessible, effective formulas that addressed the core needs of moisturization, cleansing, and tone correction without requiring the customer to understand complex ingredient lists or pharmaceutical terminology. Makeup expanded to encompass the full range of color cosmetics with shades developed to serve the diverse Avon customer base across different skin tones and different beauty preferences. The Avon Anew skincare range, launched in 1992, represented the brand's most significant individual skincare innovation and the most commercially successful range in its history. Anew was built around retinol, the vitamin A derivative that dermatological research had established as the most evidence-backed anti-aging active in the category, and was the first mass-market skincare range to incorporate retinol as a primary active ingredient. The launch of Anew preceded by several years the widespread adoption of retinol by the mainstream skincare market and established Avon as a scientific innovator in a category where the brand's direct selling model gave it a specific advantage. The ability to explain the science of retinol directly to customers through their representatives, in the context of a trusted personal relationship, in a way that made the ingredient's mechanism and its benefits comprehensible and compelling without the mediation of advertising or the distance of a retail encounter. The Avon Foundation for Women, established in 1955 and significantly expanded in subsequent decades, became one of the most substantial corporate philanthropic initiatives in the history of the beauty industry. The foundation's focus on issues specifically affecting women, breast cancer research and awareness, domestic violence prevention, access to education, reflected the direct relationship between the brand and its community of female customers and representatives in a way that made the philanthropy feel genuinely connected to the business rather than decorative. The Avon Breast Cancer Crusade, launched in the early 1990s, raised more than $900 million for breast cancer research and education globally, a figure that represents one of the largest single-cause fundraising achievements in the history of corporate philanthropy. The Walk for Breast Cancer events that Avon organized in multiple countries, bringing together thousands of participants in public demonstrations of solidarity and fundraising commitment, were community events that grew directly from the Avon Representative Network, the network of women who trusted each other because they had been selling to each other and buying from each other and sitting at each other's kitchen tables for decades. The social capital embedded in the Avon Representative Network was not just commercially useful. It was genuine human connection, and when it was mobilized for a cause as personally resonant as breast cancer, a disease that affected the communities the Avon ladies lived and worked in directly, the result was an expression of collective purpose that no conventional corporate fundraising campaign could have replicated. The digital transformation challenges that Avon faced from the 2000s onward were real and significant. The rise of e-commerce created for the first time a viable alternative to the direct selling model for the kinds of accessible, affordable beauty products that Avon had always sold, an alternative that did not require a human intermediary and that offered convenience and variety that the traditional representative model could not always match. The simultaneous rise of beauty specialty retail, with Sephora and similar concepts bringing the open access, multi-brand retail experience to consumers who had previously had to choose between brand counters and direct sellers, created competitive pressure from another direction. Avon's response to these challenges was complicated by its own corporate complexity, by the difficulty of transforming a business model built on human networks at global scale in an era when digital was transforming every consumer interaction. The acquisition of Avon by Natura, the Brazilian cosmetics company, in 2020 brought the brand into a portfolio alongside The Body Shop and Natura's own direct-selling Brazilian business in a combination that made geographic and strategic sense, giving Avon access to Natura's Brazilian market expertise and its commitment to sustainable and ethical business practices, while giving Natura access to Avon's extraordinary global representative network and its century of direct-selling experience. The Avon of today is still ringing doorbells. Not always literally. The digital transformation of the representative relationship means that many Avon representatives now operate primarily through social media and online catalogs rather than through in-person home visits. But the fundamental model, the trusted personal relationship between a representative and a customer, the social selling dynamic in which beauty products move through networks of human connection rather than through retail infrastructure, the economic opportunity for women who become representatives, is still entirely recognizable as the thing David McConnell built when he traded his books for perfume in 1886. The number of Avon representatives worldwide has at various points in the brand's history exceeded 6 million. 6 million women, and increasingly men, earning income through the most personal and most human form of beauty retail that has ever existed. 6 million people ringing doorbells and sitting at kitchen tables and opening bags of products and having the specific conversation that the Avon model makes possible and that no e-commerce algorithm or retail floor plan can replicate. The conversation between people who know each other. Between a seller who genuinely believes in what she is selling and a buyer who trusts the person selling it. Between two people who share a neighborhood, a community, a life context, and who meet over a bag of beauty products and leave having had an encounter that was about more than the products. That is what David McConnell built. Not a beauty company. A network of human connection, wrapped around beautiful products, powered by the economic ambitions and the entrepreneurial energy of millions of women across every country on Earth. The doorbell is still ringing. And when it rings, something genuinely worth answering is on the other side.